Okay, so we'll wait just a couple moments because it's got to transfer everyone out of the waiting room and get into the main room. I heard the robot voice say that it's recording, so that's a good first step. All right, seeing those participants shoot on up. Perfect. Well, I will go ahead and just kind of slowly get my intro going so that by the time I finish, everyone should be fully logged in. This is being recorded as a reminder, so if you really want to catch the first part of my spiel and you miss it later, you always can do that when we post the recordings. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for virtually being here. It was a pleasure to see so many folks in our first session, and we're getting a good turnout for this second session today of our annual overdose series. So, this session, I am so excited to introduce Dr. Jason Kilmer. So, let me go ahead and read his bio, and then I'll go through some housekeeping and then pass the reins to him. So, Dr. Jason Kilmer is an associate professor in psychiatry and behavioral sciences at the University of Washington and serves as an investigator on several studies evaluating prevention and intervention efforts on alcohol, marijuana, and other drugs used by college students. In addition to research and teaching, he has worked extensively with college students and student groups around alcohol and other drug prevention programming and presentations throughout his career, both at UW and on campuses across the nation. As faculty in the School of Medicine, Jason continues his direct work with students through presentations for intercollegiate athletics and residence life. Jason also serves as the chairperson of Washington State's College Coalition for Substance Abuse Prevention. So before I turn it over to Jason, just a bit of housekeeping here. So please ask any and all questions as you have them in the Q&A box. We will be monitoring that throughout. If it is a kind of a clarifying question, I will go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Kilmer as you ask it. But if it's a big picture question, we're going to sit on it a little closer to the end because he may get to that question already later on in his presentation. A reminder that yes, you will get a certificate of attendance by attending this if you fill out the survey that we will send out later on in the session. If you attend other sessions today, we ask that you fill out that survey once at the end of the day. All right, without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Jason Kilmer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now I want the certificate, so I'm going to fill out that survey at the end. I was like, I didn't know there'd be. I'm in. Thank you, Alex. While I got you on the screen, I don't know if you're keeping your video on or not. Whoop. I just want to acknowledge how much you do. I get to see Alex at the Washington Healthy Youth Coalition meetings. There are people in this state that if they say, Jason, can you do blank? I will happily always say yes. And Alex, you're on that list. I just want to thank you for the work you do to support prevention in Washington. Prevention's hard. People don't call us and say, hey, good news, nothing bad happened last night, so keep it up. But if God forbid something happens, people are like, what have we been doing about this? So from the bottom of my heart and publicly, thank you for what you do and the difference you make in Washington State. I'm going to share my screen and also say, I didn't realize that I'd sent in or that Alex had an older bio. I get to say out loud for the fourth time in my career, I get to drop the word associate. I got promoted to full professor on July 1st. So I'm a professor in psychiatry and behavioral sciences. I need to stop smiling so huge when I say that. But also an adjunct professor in psychology at the University of Washington. Very cool full circle moment for me. I started as a first year student at the University of Washington in 1987, and 37 years later, it's a cool full circle moment at the University of Washington for me. Big thanks again to Alex, to Megan, to Justin, and the Washington Poison Center. And what I said I would cover is what it means to do harm reduction. It's awesome when I meet people that say, we've been doing harm reduction forever. And I'm glad it feels that way. But in some ways, that's not true, especially with young adults. I also hear people say, well, we'd love to do harm reduction, but it's too controversial. Or there are mixed messages. I'll try and address that and talk about that as best as I possibly can. So I'll include a focus on how messages can be delivered within a motivational enhancement framework. The bulk of the work that I do is around motivational interviewing that was developed by Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick. We could spend the rest of the day talking about that, and I don't have that ability. So by no means will I do justice to MI, but I want to at least put a spotlight on the lessons we've learned from motivational enhancement when we talk about harm reduction. And then I'll show you, at least in the work we do with college students as a subset of young adults, the guidelines for reducing harm around alcohol use and cannabis use and what that means in prevention. I had the chance earlier this summer to think about Venn diagrams in a presentation that I did. And I went down such a rabbit hole learning about Venn diagrams that I was like, wow, it'd really be a shame if that all just kind of went away with that presentation. And I actually thought it's well suited to today's presentation. Venn diagrams are in fact named after John Venn. Uh, John Venn was a mathematician, and I don't mean to diminish his contributions. But I do feel like any one of us probably could have pulled out our protractor and blown the minds of our friends. Because I feel like he was sitting around in his residence hall in the 1850s. I'm pretty sure they had residence halls in the 1850s. And one of his friends was like, man, I love ham sandwiches. And the other friend was like, I love cheese sandwiches. And another friend says, I love ham and cheese sandwiches. To which another friend said, yeah, but I wonder how many people like ham sandwiches, but not. And John Venn was like, boys, I'm going to blow your mind, and started drawing circles. So, of course, the idea of the Venn diagram is there's a concept A, there's a concept B, and then there's where there's both A and B. I learned that John Venn continues to be celebrated in England, where he went to college and where his hometown is. Where he went to college, they actually have stained glass windows dedicated to the Venn diagram. There's also a pretty impressive kind of tribute to him put up where they made a Venn diagram of mathematician, philosophers, Anglican priests, people with a really strong beard game, and then the overlap is John Venn. And I was like, well, that's funny. I bet I can make some of my own Venn diagrams. And I was up to the challenge. So just a couple examples. There's famous rivers in North America. There's topics sung about by Duran Duran, greatest band of all time, and the overlap, there's Rio right there. So there's me putting a Venn diagram to work. Had the chance to go to the Seattle Art Museum at the start of the summer. I saw this. Entertaining myself, one guard, and a 7-year-old. I made this statue better by showing that I took its nose. And literally, no one else was amused. But that 7-year-old thought I was pretty hilarious. So I made a Venn diagram of no nose, nose, and there's I got your nose in the center. I love the holidays. I love holiday music. We were the Washington Poison Center team. We were just talking about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And as much as I love song lyrics, there's one song lyric that always gets me super fired up, honestly. And it's a lyric that's not enjoyable. And it's from the song Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow, where the person says it doesn't show signs of stopping. And I brought some corn for popping. One of the worst thing you can bring to a friend's house? Unpopped corn. Don't be that person, right? Hey, look what I brought. I got a microwave. You could have even brought microwave popcorn. Why are you bringing unpopped corn? This is why no one invites you to things, Carl. Bring a cheese plate like normal people. So I made a Venn diagram where there's no overlap. There's corn for popping, and then there's literally all other food that is acceptable to bring to a holiday party. And so for today's topic, I hear too many people say, well, we do harm reduction, and then we do our alcohol and other drug prevention with no overlap. These circles can be expanded, and there can be overlap. If you're presenting to middle school students, you might not be doing a lot that includes a harm reduction message necessarily. You need to be aware of your audience. You need to be aware of the substance. You need to be aware of the topic and context. But there are opportunities to really discuss these things. And I do think that overlap, I will try and make the case that we can incorporate harm reduction strategies into the prevention work that we do. So I'm going to be presenting to a group of students. I have 2 big presentations next week. And when those students look at their orientation agenda and they say, hooray, the substance use speaker's coming. Hooray. What's the message they expect to hear from someone like me? Feel free to put it in the chat. What do people expect to hear? Yeah, don't do drugs, don't use drugs, just say no, drugs are bad. This is your brain on drugs with the frying egg. Does just say no, with the age group I work with, does just say no work with college students? I want to give a shout out to Morgan Webb in the chat for making the awesome Mr. Mackey South Park reference with drugs are bad, okay? Doesn't work. Tell me why. Why does just say no not work with college students? What would you say? The reasons for using aren't addressed. So especially if you're working with a particularly young adults that think critically, there's no critical thinking to don't do it. They're experimenting socially. They're trying to figure out what they like, what they don't like. They believe they're invincible. Most don't have bad experiences when they've said yes. Their friends are cooler than you. That's very scientifically true. They need to know the why. Again, there's no critical thinking there. Peer pressure, it's their first time away from parents, new freedom. The need to self medicate for mental health issues, maybe trauma. Uh, drugs bad, addictions of D's, recidivism rates for treatment are high. You can't tell them what to do, they'll do the opposite. But the perceived risks don't outweigh the perceived benefits. They deserve to be told the truth. They're experiencing newfound freedom and independence, and they'll try anything and everything. So listen, you've saved researchers a lot of time and grant money. Because if you look at the research on fact only, abstinence only, typically information only approaches with the age group that I work with, it doesn't result in behavior change. It's not fair to say it has no effect, period. Some studies show an increase in knowledge. So people can tell you really cool facts about the drink that's in their hand. There's not drinking any fewer of them if you do a message like that. So we can't tell people to just say no. We obviously can't tell people to just say yes. What can we do? This is where this evolution took place in the state of Washington. I obviously had accidentally clicked ahead when trying to open the chat, and you saw that just say no. That phrase became a thing in the early 80s. When speaking in Oakland, California in 1982, First Lady Nancy Reagan was asked, "What do you do if someone offers you drugs?" And she said, "Well, you just say no." By 1988, on college campuses, if you looked in the published literature, the number of published studies showing significant reductions in drinking, consequences, or both was none. We had no published successes. What did we have, according to the Reagan National Library? Over 12,000 Just Say No clubs. That's where we were as a country. So when I do hear people say, we've done harm reduction forever, I never want to be like the older guy that's like, well, technically. But I started working in the lab of Dr. Alan Marlatt in 1989 as they were doing some work other than Just Say No. And I got to watch really the evolution of this in my own professional career. What's interesting is David Hansen, one of the biggest names in the college alcohol field, showed that while prevention strategies done that are just say no might increase knowledge, attitudes are way more difficult to change. Most studies show no change in actual patterns of use. The studies of college students, in fact, showed no change. So it was Alan Marlatt at the University of Washington in the late 1980s that said, what if we talk about harm reduction? To truly understand how controversial that was, go back to 1988. No published successes, 12,000 Just Say No clubs. I do what I do today because of two people, Alan Marlatt and Mary Larimer. Alan was my advisor in graduate school, and he passed away in 2011. It takes a very special faculty member for a day after that person's passing for Time Magazine to write a tribute about the person. But Time Magazine said, in a world so often focused on treating addiction with tough love, Marlatt showed through his work and his life that kindness simply works better. His whole sense was, I don't want to do something that feels like it's adversarial. I want to be accepting. I want to be lessening stigma. In many ways, very much ahead of his time. Alan said, and Alan developed using harm reduction strategies, two programs that to this day are the gold standard. I thought about unveiling this at the end. I'm like, I'm just going to do the reveal right now. He developed the Alcohol Skills Training Program, which is a group session using motivational enhancement and focused on reducing harm when students make the choice to drink. He also developed Basics, the brief alcohol screening and intervention for college students program, delivered one-on-one with a facilitator using motivational interviewing, working with a student, and the provider elicits personally relevant reasons to change, and when change is discussed, includes harm reduction strategies. The National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, NIAAA, released the College Alcohol Intervention Matrix, a review of over 60 individually focused and environmentally focused strategies. And they rate these strategies in columns of their relative cost and in rows of their relative effectiveness. I want you to see that on the top row, of individually focused approaches with higher effectiveness. There's the alcohol skills training program mentioned by name. There's basics mentioned by name. I'm proud that two of the single best tools we have in the prevention field were developed right here in the state of Washington. And I'm certainly proud they were developed by the person that I had the honor of working with until he passed away. This comes from the federal government. This tool comes from the federal government. And so when people say, is it too controversial to do a harm reduction focused approach, especially with people that are under 21? I think what's remarkable is that a branch of NIH, the National Institutes of Health, have said, if you look at the data, the bottom line is this approach works. What Alan made very, very clear is that there were misunderstandings about harm reduction. And harm reduction, too many people describe it as being equal to moderation or somehow anti-abstinence. And nothing could be farther from the truth. If someone says, I want to avoid all of a substance's unwanted outcomes, then don't use that substance. The most harm-free or risk-free outcome after a harm reduction intervention is, in fact, abstinence. But what a harm reduction approach acknowledges is that any steps towards reduced risk are steps in the right direction. Consider alcohol. I come to you drinking 40 drinks a week and experiencing lots of consequences. And now I go through a program you offer that has a harm reduction focus. Pardon me, let's leave that focus out. I go through a program you offer and I reduce my drinking to 10 drinks a week with way fewer consequences. Well done. However, if your treatment outcome goal is abstinence, I'm a treatment failure, and you can't pretend to call me anything but that because I'm still drinking. In some programs in Washington, I'm kicked out. But how could we overlook a reduction that dramatic, especially if it's associated with a reduction in harm? Sometimes reducing harm isn't use reduction. It's truly harm reduction. You're meeting with a person, pretty small human being, and they tell you, I drink 5 drinks every Friday, 5 drinks every Saturday. All 5 of those drinks are shots of hard alcohol on an empty stomach over 2 minutes. By that person's admission, they get pretty intoxicated pretty quickly. They say things they often regret. Sometimes they feel sick. They don't love how they feel the next day, and they're embarrassed to admit that at least once a month they drive when they probably shouldn't. Now, they go through a harm reduction focused program, and they decide, I'm done with shots. I'm going to drink beer. I'm done with empty stomach. I'm going to eat prior to and while drinking. I'm done with slamming everything over 2 minutes. I'm going to space my drinking out over 3 hours. I'm going to alternate every alcoholic drink with water. I've told all my friends what I'm doing. I've asked them to hold me accountable as long as they're cool doing that. And I've downloaded every rideshare app known to humanity because me driving, that's over. What's that? How much am I going to drink? 5 on Friday, 5 on Saturday. If all you do is look at their survey, it looks like nothing changed. When the truth is, a lot changed. They're getting to a lower blood alcohol level. They're using more protective behavioral strategies. They're in fact reducing harm. I work at a state school. How do we deliver a harm reduction message, though, and not seem like we're giving a mixed message, seem like we're kind of like wink, wink, anything like that? Legal issues are always acknowledged. I've never been in front of a student or group of students where I haven't made clear, if you're under 21, it's illegal to drink. Driving after drinking, never recommended. If someone says, I want to avoid all of a substance's unwanted effects, abstinence is the best way to do that. But the language is really clear. We don't say, I know you're going to drink, so if you do, do this. If you stand up in front of a group and go, I know you're all going to drink, so if you do, do it this way, I know you're all going to drink is a misperceived norm. I work on a college campus. For the 1 in 5 students who don't drink, they just heard someone say everyone drinks here. If they're under 21, I know you're all going to drink, so if you do, do it this way, kind of sounds like permission giving. We're also very careful never to say, here's how to drink safely. Because with any positive blood alcohol level, there could be risks, harms, or unwanted outcomes. What do we say instead? If you make the choice to drink, we'll talk about ways to do that in a less dangerous or less risky way. Here's the catch. If I'm an 18-year-old and some guy's telling me, here's how you can drink in a less dangerous or less risky way, who cares? Why would I even want to do that? And that is where our job changes. A program provider, a facilitator, a presenter has to elicit personally relevant reasons for change. And that's done using the stages of change model and motivational interviewing. I will introduce you to both of those next. If you take 3 things out of today, I actually hope this is one of them. And one of them is to be aware of action stage suggestions, no matter what your message is. Jim Prochaska and Carla DiClemente are credited with developing the trans-theoretical model of change, sometimes referred to as the readiness to change model or the stages of change model. And they developed it all throughout the 1980s in response to cigarette smoking. They said, if you think about it, they had never met someone who smoked cigarettes who was unaware of the health consequences, right? We don't meet people that are like, wait, what? These are bad for me? No one told me. But there are different levels of readiness to have a healthcare provider, a loved one say, I really think you should quit. Depending on which version of their publication you pick up, there's either 5, 6, or 7 of these stages, drawn as a ladder, a wheel, a spiral. But just for the sake of discussion, let's look at these 5 stages of change. The first stage of change is a made-up word. How cool is that? If you're going to invent a theory, invent a word. These are people who aren't just contemplating, they're pre-contemplating. They haven't even begun to think, why do I need to make a change in my behavior? Someone has 15 drinks on a college campus, breaks stuff, and has to go through conduct. Lost in the shuffle is they had 15 drinks and broke stuff. And instead, they make statements like, doesn't campus security have anything better to do than pick on college students? Or this isn't my fault, it's my roommate's fault because my roommate answered the door when the RA knocked. No recognition of a need to change. Contemplation is what it sounds like. Maybe a person's noticing stuff. Wow, this is the 3rd weekend in a row where I don't remember part of my weekend. That's probably not good. Or I had $100 in my wallet on Friday. The only place we went were the bars. It's now Sunday and I have $0. Wow, that's like $5,000 a year on drinking. Yeah, but those drinks are good. The key to the stage of change is ambivalence. If you hear a person say the word but, they're probably in contemplation. Sometimes I think if I cut down on my drinking, I'd feel a lot better in the morning, and I'd probably do better in school, but I wouldn't have as much fun as my friends are having, and that would suck. I feel like I should exercise more, but when? My day is so packed that I'm really, really tired. I feel like I should eat healthier, but kale is disgusting and not meant to be eaten. If you hear the word but, contemplation, and usually it's a sign that the person's ambivalent about what to do. Preparation, a person's thought about it and said, I'm going to make a change. New Year's resolutions are an example of this. If someone says on January 1st, I'm going to stop vaping, start exercising, cut down on my cannabis use, they're declared their intent to change, they haven't started yet. Action is what it sounds like. A person's actively making a change in a behavior. Maintenance is also what it sounds like. A person made a change 6 months or more ago, and they're trying to maintain the changes they've set in motion. I hope this all makes sense. I asked you, what, 10, 15 minutes ago? Does just say no work with the age group I work with? And you gave me perfectly great reasons why it probably does not. With no disrespect to any of the answers you gave me, I would encourage you to rethink your answer through the eyes of this model. Just say no is an action stage request. And if you're saying it to an individual or group of people who are in pre-contemplation or contemplation, there's an absolute disconnect between what we're asking for as the prevention specialist, the interventionist, the healthcare provider, and where those people are in terms of their level of readiness to change. What that means through the eyes of this model is just say cut down, just say moderate, just say use in a less dangerous or less risky way. Honestly, would be as equally dismissible and equally laughable a goal as just say no if it's asking for action in people who aren't there yet. And would you believe the data back that up? Will Corbin and Kim Fromey did a study with incoming first-year college students where they said, welcome to college. We're done with that high school messaging you've been hearing all these years. Here's how you can drink in a less dangerous or less risky way. Click. They put up a bunch of strategies. Do this, 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 this. The program performed just like a just say no program. Increase in knowledge, no change in behavior. In the discussion section, they said, we think we know why. We dove right in with do this in people who were like, I haven't even met my roommate yet. Or, listen, I want to be successful academically, but I want to have a social life too. I don't know what I'm going to do. So what that means is our job changes. If someone says, I identify as proudly being in recovery. I haven't used anything in 3 years. I want to keep that going, and I'm willing to admit I feel triggered lately. We can line them up with recovery support. There's an entire branch of research dedicated to the concept of preventing a slip, a lapse, a relapse. If someone says, I know I want to stop or cut down, I don't know the best way to do that. We can assess them, provide skills training. Who do we likely and often work with? People who aren't yet thinking about change, or who are at best ambivalent about change. These are the people for whom motivational enhancement would be indicated, because decades of research on motivational interviewing shows it's an approach that can be used to prompt consideration of change in people who were in pre-contemplation. For those that are feeling ambivalent or stuck, it can result in them getting unstuck, such that they either commit to change or even take initial actions. I'm going to pause to see what questions there are, and I don't want to force my own aha moment on you, but I'll never forget the first time this was explained to me, and I realized how many well-intended action stage suggestions people get. If someone says, I'm so anxious, I am so stressed, I don't feel like me, I'm down, I don't know what to do. Go to counseling. It's free. They told us, I don't know what to do. My roommate's driving me crazy. Talk to them or talk to the RA. Am I in the right school? Like maybe I'm not even the right major. Everyone feels that way. Go to academic advising. They'll help you. First, telling someone everyone feels that way is kind of invalidating. Second, it's an action stage suggestion. So let me pause before I continue just to see what clarifying questions there may be, what comments people have before I continue.
None so far, Dr. Kilmer, but if folks
You,
are like me,
you
they're
can call me
still just
Jason.
like,
You can
oh,
call me Jason,
okay, there we
Alex.
go. Watch me say Dr. Jason
No,
next
you don't
time.
have to do that.
But no question so far. But I'm guessing a lot of folks are still like processing and feeling the goosebumps from some of
They're
the
all,
like mic drop
they're,
moments you've
they're all
had.
throwing away their unpopped corn at this very moment, as I
Exactly.
believe
Yeah.
what they're doing. Uh, oh, thank you for the feedback. Great. All right. Well, I'm going to keep going. So one of the things is be mindful of not contributing to misperceived norms. If you have a harm reduction message to give, be mindful of not contributing to misperceived norms. My meeting right before I got on Zoom was with someone that told me that their belief was that at their campus, ecstasy use was, and I quote, rampant. Nope, there's not a single study that's ever come out, nor incidence, nor prevalence data that suggests that's the case. Certainly, if they talk to people that are using Molly and saying, wow, I don't even know if what I used was laced with something or not, that's both scary, but it can contribute to a misperceived norm. So no matter what you do, no matter what substance you're addressing, nor what age group you work with, know what stories are in your data. I didn't want this to be too college focused. I can't help the fact that I work on a college campus, but you heard me say 1 in 5 students don't drink. We're very, very careful to make sure those students know they're not alone and to feel supported in the decision to not drink. We also know that it's about 28% of students that drink 5 or more drinks, what some people refer to as a heavy episode or binge drinking, meaning 72% either don't drink at all or have 1, 2, 3, or at the most 4. If we always give examples about extreme behavior, that can contribute to a misperceived norm. I feel like I read the news half the time for the news and half the time to see if there are headlines that make me laugh. I saw in the Seattle Times article that said, we all use phones on the toilet, just don't sit for more than 10 minutes. Well, first, that's a misperceived norm. I mean, unless you have the data to show it's truly 100%, come on. That's harm reduction right there. All in one headline. How about that? So many evidence-based harm reduction approaches are informed by motivation and viewing, and we've learned some very valuable lessons about messaging. One of those is how we have to be non-judgmental and non-confrontational. Motivational interviewing is not new. When the first book came out from Miller and Rolnick, it was entitled Preparing People to Change Addictive Behavior. And it was meant for a therapist and their client, a clinician and the person they were working with in a one-on-one setting discussing addictive behaviors. There was some research that showed that in groups, you could use motivation enhancement techniques. 10 years later, when their second edition came out, they showed this not only works with groups and with individuals, but it works for, if I can get the list right, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, anger management, medication adherence, body image issues. So they dropped the addictive behavior part. They changed the title to Preparing People for Change. 10 years later, they showed this continues to work. And if you're not a therapist, if you're not a clinician, but you talk to people for a living, you can do this well, you can do this effectively. Because at the end of the day, motivational interviewing strategies are great communication strategies. So they changed the subtitle to Helping People Change. Their final edition, or their most recent edition that came out last summer, was changed to Helping People Change and Grow. As of yesterday morning, we're at the point where they have 1,947 published clinical trials, including 1,832 randomized controlled trials, demonstrated the impact of this approach. I have yet to meet someone that's read all of these articles, but I work with people that have read most of them. And what the research shows is this. When you do an approach with fidelity to motivational interviewing spirit, style, and strategies, it really tends to work. If you don't, it doesn't. So in the short time I have, just to try and give you a flavor of this, they are non-judgmental, they're non-confrontational. That's so key. I remember hearing a presenter once say, this is not a just say no program. It's also not just say yes, but if you do say yes, we're going to talk about ways that if you make the choice you use to do it in a less dangerous or less risky way. I was thinking, this presenter's great. They went on to say, whatever you choose to do with this information is up to you. I'm just here to help you make better choices. And I was like, ooh, I'm here to help you make better choices means I don't think you're making good ones now. It's judgmental. That's confrontational. It's all about meeting people where they are in terms of their level of readiness to change. Is this a group that people chose to go to, or is it a class where they have to attend? It's all about eliciting personally relevant reasons to change. What's in it for the human being sitting across from you to decide, I think I want to make a change in my behavior? When a person's ambivalent or stuck, we can explore and resolve that ambivalence, and when relevant to the person, discuss behavior change strategies. The science shows that where this all falls apart, frankly, is if we piss people off. We have very few absolutes in our field, but one of them is this. As a person's resistance or defensiveness goes up, the likelihood of making a change goes down. I used to struggle with Miller and Rolnick's claim that resistance is verbal, because we obviously know about nonverbal communication. But you can read a transcript and you can go, yikes, there's the resistance right there. I can make a student sound resistant in 5 seconds. I wouldn't want to, but I could. Hold up, you don't think you have a problem with drinking? They're going to get resistant. They're going to get defensive. You say you like drinking because you like the taste. If that's true, why do you need 8? Couldn't you have 2? They're going to get resistant. They're going to get defensive. Why? Because I'm calling them out. You drink because you like the taste. It's expected and normal. How come? Because it sucks to be told you're doing it wrong. You're the bad client. You're the bad patient. You're bad. Here's the freaky part. It comes from us as the presenter or facilitator or counselor. A study done at the University of New Mexico, where Bill Miller worked, they put a bug in the ear of a therapist who heard 2 tones and 2 tones only. When they heard 1 tone, they would kindly and gently confront what they were seeing and make suggestions for change. When they heard a different tone, they'd use motivational interviewing strategies. A coder, unaware of when the tone was going off, did nothing but code the behavior of the client. Like clockwork, what do we as human beings do when we're confronted? We defend ourselves. The person talked about why they were fine, why change wasn't needed, and why everything was okay. When the provider used MI strategies, the person talked about what gains they could experience if change took place, and even what change might look like. Because resistance is predictive of non-change and so responsive to our style, MI focuses on reducing resistance and even provides strategies for reducing resistance. Why do we do something like a brief intervention that uses MI? If there are potential risks or harms, we can provide early intervention to alter trajectories. I'll never forget being in a meeting and hearing someone say of an 18-year-old, well, they haven't hit rock bottom yet. Why would we want an 18-year-old to hit rock bottom? We can alter trajectories. If in line with what motivates the person, prompt thinking about change, or even commitment to change or even initial action. If the only thing you do is reduce the resistance or defensiveness, you've done a lot. We talk a lot in this field about planting seeds. Those seeds will never grow if they're aggressively ripped from the ground because someone feels judged or labeled. Helene White at Rutgers University published research documenting a sleeper effect of these motivational enhancement approaches, where you randomly assign people to a control group or a brief intervention group. And at 1 month, a lot of people in the brief intervention group changed, but not all of them. When we follow people over time, we see at 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, there is this change. I have said before that in some ways, the absence of a slammed door is a total clinical success. If someone's like, you don't know me, I'm out of here, and they leave, probably not going to see them again. Reducing resistance is a completely okay outcome and makes a big difference. And finally, explore behavior change strategies and discuss skills to reduce harms. So, a few highlights, because I can't possibly do justice to MI. There are limits to direct persuasion. Decades of research going back to the 1950s shows that if we're not sure what to do, having someone try to convince us isn't going to make a difference. I mean, take it out of substance use for a minute. Again, I work on a college campus. If a student says, I don't know what to do this upcoming year, I'm going to be a senior, I graduate in the spring, I don't know if I should apply for all those grad schools that have applications due in December, or if when I graduate, I should take some time off, travel a bit, make some money, and then apply to grad school. If you say you are so smart, you're one of the best students I've ever worked with, I'll write you the best letter ever, I'd apply to grad school. 99 times out of 100, what do? Defend the opposite. Yeah, but if I took time off, I could re-energize a bit, recharge, maybe get better experiences and get into a better grad school. All right, well, do that then. Yeah, but use it or lose it. If I go straight into grad school, I could keep the ball rolling. So it's not this weird, like, don't change. But if you lobby for change, the person will defend not changing. If you hear the person say, yeah, but, you're probably lobbying for change. If you cut down, think how great you'd feel in the morning. Yeah, but I wouldn't have as much fun as my friends are having. But you'd remember the fun. Yeah, but I wouldn't have the stories to tell, and it's all about the stories. Jim Schaus at the University of Central Florida tells his staff, if you feel like you're dancing with the people you're working with, this is going great. If you feel like you're wrestling with them, that's where this just doesn't work. So we're not directive in telling people what to do. We are directive in helping people examine and resolve ambivalence. We are at the point where in 2024, we have no evidence that denial is truly a characteristic of people. Miller and Rowling talk about rolling with resistance. And in that, just 2 points in the interest of time, they talk about avoiding arguing with people. How come? First, it doesn't feel great to argue with people. And second, go back to intro to psych. I always feel like good things happen when you go back to intro to psych. We learned about something called cognitive dissonance theory that says if I say or do something that doesn't match how I think, I'll change my way of thinking to match my actions. If a student or person is saying to you, wow, I do not need to change, I do not have a problem, everything we know about cognitive dissonance theory is they're going to change their thinking to match that statement. Labeling is not only unnecessary, it's completely contraindicated. We do everything in our power to avoid terms like alcoholic, addict. If a person uses that term first, we want to respect how they identify, but we don't introduce those terms. We don't use the P word, problem. We avoid the phrase negative consequence. The research by Miller and Rowling suggests that denial is not a characteristic of an individual. It's a byproduct of what was probably a well-intended conversation that just didn't land very well. If someone sits me down and says, Jace, I love you, buddy, and I'm here for you, but I'm worried about you. I think you're an alcoholic. You've got a problem. You need help. You need to go to treatment. If I go, whoa, back off. You got a problem. You need to go to treatment. Classically, we'd say I'm in denial. Motivation interviewing would say, but what was he supposed to say? You labeled me alcoholic. You diagnosed me. You got a problem. You told me what I need to do. You need to go to treatment. So if you're meeting with someone, you're like, ooh, someone's in denial. It could be a clue that we've said something that stepped on toes. And while I mentioned that, even what we call consequences matter. Miller and Rolnick talk about the importance of using open-ended questions. They point out that so many closed-ended questions are leading. I've literally heard a healthcare provider say, you don't ever have more than 5 drinks, do you? Who would say yes to that? Yeah, I'm gonna go with no, doc. Thanks for asking. What does your drinking look like? Open-ended question. 2 friends had an awkward encounter at work. One checks in with the other. Hey, we're good, right? I mean, say yes. Do you think you could try this? What's the subtext? I think you should try this. So we're very careful to be aware of leading closed-ended questions. And when we want people to start thinking about what they've experienced, what are the harms? We don't call them harms. We don't call them problems. We don't call them negative consequences. We start with, what are the good things about fill in the name of the substance you're discussing or the behavior? What are the good things about drinking for you? What are the good things about using weed for you? First, they will be delighted to tell you. Only after they've generated all that, you ask, what are the not so good things about drinking for you? Here's game show time. I'd love to see what number people would predict in response to this question, if you're willing to play in the chat. I run the mandated student groups at the University of Washington for students that have violated our campus drug policy for cannabis in a state that's had legal weed for 11 plus years. When I ask a group of 5 to 8 undergrads, a couple of whom are usually pretty big fans of cannabis use, what are the not so good things about, I use whatever word they use, what are the not so good things about marijuana for you, about weed for you? How long a list do I get from them? What would you predict? Very short, less than 3. I got to guess a 10 is the ceiling. 4 to 6, maybe just 1. Looks like most people are guessing 2 to 3. Just to make the point, 2 back-to-back groups, I eliminated the duplicates. There's my list. I always get surprised when people say, well, you can't talk to young adults about marijuana. They don't see any negative consequences. That's not true. It's what we call them. If I start those groups and I'm like, hey, I know you all got in trouble. Sorry about that. I'm going to make this as painless as possible. We'll probably end early today. Let's talk. What problems have you had with weed? I don't have any problems. You got a problem. Nice shirt. Thank you. What are the good things? What are the not so good things? Scott Walters at University of North Texas Health Sciences said to our field, heads up providers, we learned that it was our providers prematurely ending this list because the clients would generate 3, 4 things and the provider would go, great. Anything else? Anything else is a close-ended yes, no question. And when packaged with a hand clap and the word great communicates, let's wrap this up. Instead say, what else? It'll keep the person talking. You can say, what would it be like if some of those not so good things happen less often? Any affirmative or positive answer is what Miller and Rowland call change talk. If you ask, what would make some of those not so good things happen less often? Anything the person identified is a person identified strategy for behavior change. So close-ended questions are discouraged. We don't ask things like, don't you want to feel better? Do you think you have a problem? There's nothing I need to know about, is there? Is everything going okay? Couldn't you just cut down? Have you thought of trying this? Do you think you could try this? How do you want to feel? How do you feel about your substance use right now? What's going on? How are things going? What are your thoughts about what would bring you closer to where you want to be? What have you thought of trying? These are the types of things we ask. I made reference earlier to the greatest band of all time, and even the greatest band of all time evolved in the questions that they asked. Duran Duran at one point asked close-ended questions, including, please tell me now, is there something I should know? Hey there, woo, look at that. Did he nearly run you down? That was a pretty good dramatic reading from Rio, by the way. Is there anybody out there trying to get through? But then they moved to open-ended questions. Who do you need? Who do you love when you come undone? Why, don't you use it? In watching Lovers Part, I feel you smiling. What glass splinters lie so deep in your mind? It's a good day when you can quote 80s lyrics throughout a presentation. So as I start to move toward the finish line, are there mixed messages if we discuss harm reduction? No, I don't think there are. If someone is struggling, the question becomes, what works now? And there's not too much controversial about, I care about you, and I don't want you to die. Think of behavior other than substance use. Skiing. Most skiers, snowboarders now wearing helmets. There was a study done that said the study concluded that ski and snowboard helmets are very effective in preventing skull fractures and virtually eliminated scalp lacerations. Helmets aren't going to save you from serious injuries in extreme cases of reckless skiing, speed, and collisions. And they showed that during the period of the study, look at the way things have changed. Helmet use went from 8% to 84%. Using a helmet is harm reduction. It may not help us avoid the most serious outcome if, God forbid, there's an accident. But it's steps that can be taken to reduce the risks associated with what can be a very risky behavior. My friend Seema Cliff reminded me, that the single most successful campaign around impaired driving was in the early 90s. A campaign was instrumental in achieving a 10% decrease in alcohol-related fatalities, the single largest one-year drop in alcohol-related fatalities ever recorded. And what was the campaign? Friends don't let friends drive drunk. Look at the wording. It wasn't friends don't let friends drink. It's harm reduction. Friends don't let friends drink and drive. We started seeing that at the federal level, could harm reduction be an essential part of a comprehensive strategy to combat the opioid epidemic? And there are groups focused on harm reduction. Never use alone. What's the idea? If someone's going to use an opiate, we can do something. If God forbid there's an overdose, as long as there's someone to either administer Narcan or call for help. So people can call this hotline. You can see their tagline: no shaming, no judgment, no preaching, just love. Never use alone. And the most recent data they have still needs to be updated. It was as of December 21st, 2022. They've received 17,800 calls, served 7,600 people, and assisted in reversing 88 drug overdoses. Because if the person says, I'm going to use now, they say, I'm going to check. If I don't hear anything, I call for help. When we look at alcohol and cannabis, there are in the published literature published strategies for reducing harm. The published strategies for reducing harm related to alcohol are based on what's called alcohol's biphasic effect. You can ask the people you're working with. If someone's at a party, gets a buzz, starts to lose that buzz, what do they usually do? They will tell you, keep on drinking, drink more. The $1 million question is, do they ever get that same buzz back? No. What do we feel instead? Sick, tired, sleepy, in quotes, the drunk part. Scientifically, we totally know why. Even though alcohol is a depressant, it's a funky depressant because the initial effects of alcohol have a buzz. If you take a sip of alcohol, if you can follow my cursor, there's this initial stimulant effect, the depressant effects kick in, the depressant effects get done doing what they're doing, body goes back to baseline. If you tap out after one sip and you're like, that's it, I'm calling it a night, there's your night. But if you continue drinking while your blood alcohol level is rising, the body's experience of alcohol is this constant until we hit and exceed a certain blood alcohol level. Once we hit and exceed that level, the effects of alcohol change irreversibly for the remainder of that drinking occasion, such that now with each subsequent drink, the positives get less positive, the depressant effects get more pronounced. That's why we don't get our buzz back. That's why the more and more and more we drink, the more we feel the drunk part. There's a very clear point where the positives have been maximized, depressant effects have been minimized, and a very clear point that when you clear it, positives get less positive, depressant effects get more pronounced. What's the cool news from a science standpoint? Thanks to researchers in Scandinavia, this shift has been identified to within 1/100th of a decimal. We know this shift occurs between 0.05 and 0.06%. What does this mean? If someone says, I want to avoid all of alcohol's unwanted effects, abstinence is the best way to do that. If someone is currently drinking in a way that results in O2, O3, O4, stick with that or even consider less. It's not that there's a better buzz to be had if they increase. But for people who you're working with that are getting to 07, 08, 09.1 or higher, if they go up to but don't exceed this point, they can flat out prevent this shift from happening. If they avoid this shift, what will they also avoid? They won't get hangovers. What do researchers think a hangover is? If you can see my cursor, it's that depressant blow that occurs when we exceed 06. Where does decision making go down? 06 and higher. Where does the shift occur? 06 and higher. You won't puke, nausea shows up at 08. You won't black out. Blackouts occur at 1.5. So if someone says, I want to set a limit, how do I do that? We give people personalized blood alcohol charts. Independent of gender identity, when identifiable, sex assigned at birth is what we use to compute blood alcohol level because there are distinct differences between males and females, even if weight is held constant. We ask a person to consider, how many hours would you like to be out doing what you do? And then they go down and work backwards. Go down until you find a point that doesn't exceed 06. Go to the left and see what that translates to. If they say, what? I wouldn't even feel that. Could mean they've developed tolerance. Tolerance is like weight. You can gain it. You can lose it. How do you lose it? Call time out for about a month. If someone says, what? I was going to use even less than that, then stick with the lower amount. But if someone says that limit will work for me, ask them, what are strategies you can use to help you stick to that limit or in general, be more control of your night? I showed you earlier, instead of saving it for the end, These are key strategies within two of the gold standards we have in our field, the Alcohol Skills Training Program and Basics for the age group that I work with. And certainly, other studies show the value and use of these harm reduction strategies in work with people. Let them come up with the strategies, but they include eating prior to or while drinking, keep track, not just of number of drinks, but number of standard drinks. We can't count containers. College students tease me, sadly, because I'm the guy that still uses a day planner. And they're like, don't you know you have a calendar on your phone? Yes. So it's always amazing to me that some college students will still say, one of the ways I keep track is by drawing on my arm. My colleagues who do work in sexual assault prevention have been quick to point out that would literally allow someone who's operating from almost a predatory or perpetrator mindset to identify who might be most vulnerable and most at risk, depending on how much they've had to drink. So if people insist on keeping track, if they say you could draw on yourself, you could explore with them, what are some other strategies that you could keep track that wouldn't also identify to other people how much you've had to drink? So keeping bottle caps in pockets, using a phone, something like that. Spacing your drinks, including alternating with non-alcoholic drinks. There's so much research that shows that there's drink matching. If you hold a cup in your hand and other people are holding a cup, when they raise a glass, you will too. And so if someone says, I normally drink 6, tonight I'm going to try and drink 3, keep 6 cups in your hands, but alternate with water. Avoid trying to outdrink or keep up with others. Avoid or alter your approach to drinking games. Slow down. Have safe transportation figured out. Not accepting a drink if you don't know what's in it. Having a friend let you know when you've had enough. And not combining substances. All of these are action stage suggestions that likely can't come from us unless the person's considering change. Instead, we ask them, what will help you have the night you're looking for? What will bring you closer to the night you're looking for? You mentioned you really don't like how you feel the next day. What would make that go away or happen less often? Let the person come up with things. Now, with cannabis, in wrapping up, we didn't have until 2022 a science-based list of harm reduction guidelines for cannabis. And I want to draw your attention to the title. It doesn't say low-risk guidelines, it says lower risk guidelines. How come? They said if you look at the science, there's no universally safe level of cannabis use. If someone says, can you talk with me about how to use weed safely? The only reliable way to avoid any risk for harm is to abstain from use. If people make the choice to use low potency products where possible. The potency concerns go up when they exceed 10% THC. 97% of Washington's retail market is above that. So those lower potency products are out there. People might need to work to find them. They said there's no one safe route of use. Every route incurs risks. Smoking without question is the most risky. If people insist on using, finding a method other than smoking. Keep use occasional. I mean, from a harm reduction standpoint, any steps towards less frequent use are steps in the right direction. But if people genuinely want to know what are the guidelines for lower risk use, a day or two a week, weekend only. If someone says I use weed every other day, that's pretty frequent use from a high risk standpoint. If people notice the decreases in attention, concentration, and memory following use, stop. And if stopping is not realistic, substantially reduce frequency and potency. Avoid driving within 6 to 8 hours after smoking, vaping, inhaling, 8 to 12 hours after use of edibles. They go on to say, depending on the age group and population you work with, that people who are pregnant, who are breastfeeding, should avoid cannabis completely. They also say there are some groups of people that may want to avoid cannabis outright or at least adjust their use. Who's that? People with a first-degree family history of or are actively dealing with a psychotic disorder, a mood disorder, or a substance use disorder. A number of you probably do work on norms. Can you address harm reduction through norms-based approaches? Absolutely. I am in awe of Millersville University's norms campaign that they did, where they said, we don't want to necessarily norm about how many people drink or what the peak amount people drink is. But what they started hearing students say is, sometimes I'd like to cut down and drink water, but won't I be like the one person with water at the party? Sometimes I think about drinking beer instead of shots, but like, is everyone going to tease me? They had data that showed that 98% of their students who drink use at least one protective strategy when drinking, and they even put with the writing on people's arms what some of those strategies can be. So in wrapping up, as you consider messaging and trying to be as inclusive, non-judgmental, non-confrontational as possible. We are in love with the health equity guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control. This has actively impacted my work personally, and it's actively impacted the work of my colleagues. Person first language, they give guidelines on. We don't talk about users. We talk about people who make the choice to use. We don't say heavy drinkers, those that drink more frequently. So helpful. They also talk about really doing what we can to not use violent imagery, things like targeting, tackling, combating. I was at a conference where I got hit in the heart when someone said, I lost a child to a school shooting, and I've come to learn that nothing good is ever on the other end of a target. And I was like, from this day forward, I'm not going to use that word in what we talk about with prevention. So they provide great guidelines for how we can, instead of a target population, the population of focus, and so on. There's also a great resource from APA. I'll send all these handouts to Alex so you have them, that talks about equity, diversion, and inclusion when we look at language in a destigmatizing way. My goal is to leave 5 minutes for questions. I left 5 minutes for questions. I want to again acknowledge Alex as a prevention leader in our state, and thank you for the work you do. I want to thank all of you for your engagement and time today, including playing the game show part. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen, see what questions we have with the time we have left. Alex, thanks for the chance to work with you today.
Always. I mean, literally, you are one of my favorite speakers on any topic. I've
Oh,
also
thank you.
never seen anyone bring unpopped corn into a into a discussion that masterfully.
Thank you very much. I was more proud of the 3 Duran Duran references, but
I
thank you very
know.
much. Thank you.
All right, so we do have a few questions here. So addressing the first one, yes, we are happy to share out the slides when they're available. Next one here. When attempting motivational interviewing and open-ended questions with people, especially young folks, how do you manage an "I don't know" answer?
I don't know answer is completely acceptable and completely okay. So when we ask a question, someone says, I don't know, you can ask a follow-up. What types of things would give you more of a sense of like when you'd know or how you'd know? If it's resistance, and if it's said with arms crossed and it's with a, I don't know, seems like it's more of an attitude, outside the scope of what we can do today is that there are a number of guidelines and strategies for reducing resistance, and one of those is reflecting. We try and hypothesize, what do I think the person means, and we can reflect. And so if someone clearly looks like they don't want to be there, you know, to even be able to say something like, you'd rather be anywhere than talking with me right now, yet you still showed up. That tends to reduce resistance. But I think if it's not said with attitude, it's genuinely, I don't know, it's to explore. It's all about exploring. It's all about eliciting. I do not meet with students where I don't first ask, what are your goals for your upcoming year? How do you want the school year to go? Big picture, how do you want your time at UW to go? Because I want to get a sense of what matters to the student. I did not, outside the scope of today, was to really do a deep dive into developing discrepancies. But a big reason why we think change happens if we can develop discrepancies between people want to be and where they're at.
Wow, thank you. That was
You.
excellent. All right, next question here. Are there any resources that you would recommend for a deeper dive into the stages of change?
The references are on the slide. The Prochaska and DiClemente articles are probably the best ones.
Excellent. Pretty big question. This next one, what is your opinion on self-harm reduce kits in schools?
You know what a self-harm reduce kit is?
I'm not
Self-harm
sure I've
reduce
heard that either. Yeah.
kit? Might need
Well,
more
anonymous
clarification.
attendee, feel free to clarify that question if you'd like. We may not have time to fully address it because we just have 2 minutes remaining. While we're
Sorry.
waiting, oh please, no, don't apologize. I think everyone was like me. We had a thread with Megan, Justin, and myself, and so much of it was just wow, wow.
Thank you.
um, all right, well, folks, while we're waiting for any additional questions to come through, a reminder that at 11:45 we do have our lunch networking session. So, and this is in honor of you, Jason. If you are like me and hungry like the wolf, please bring your lunch to to the lunch networking session. That link is just on the Eventbrite platform as well. All right. Well, Jason, any final nuggets of wisdom or Duran Duran references for our
Honestly, I
viewers.
thank you all for doing what you do. I would fear the person that claims they have all the answers. That's not me, but I feel lucky to, again, really seen the evolution of harm reduction in the age group that I work with, and was lucky to work with Dr. Marlatt and his team. As someone that does work on a college campus, for those of you who work with students, I wish you all a boring and uneventful start to the academic year. I think that's the kindest thing we can wish anyone these days. But Alex, thank you for the work you do in Washington, and thanks for the chance to work with you today.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. All right, folks, thank you all so much, and we hope to see you in 15 minutes for the lunch session. Take care, everybody.